The Korean War, which lasted from 1950 to 1953, was a significant Cold War conflict that affected people internationally. It is often referred to as the Forgotten War. The Korean War was also the setting of a major military confrontation between the United States military and the military of Mao's People's Republic of China. While the Korean War was resulting in a positive end for the United Nations, huge communist Chinese forces were summoned and they started to cross the border again between North Korea and South Korea.
A little bit about the Korean War to start. We should always remember it was a war we did not want to fight, did not expect to fight, and was not prepared to fight because it was so close to the end of World War II and we'd had enough fighting. But it was a war we had to fight. Had we not fought the Korean War, probably the Soviet Union and China would be they would have all of Far East today. Remember, this is the first battle that was the battle under the United Nations. So we had British, Turkish, Australian, all the UN. We had some French soldiers in that. So it was really a united effort.
General MacArthur and Major General Ned Almond's forces were strung across northeastern Korea. Some of the troops near the Chosin Reservoir were the 1st Marine Division and the 7th Infantry Division.
On the 23rd of November, that was Thanksgiving Day, that was our last hot meal. And it was kind of like a banquet out in the, we had turkey and roast beef and mixed meat tarts and
What was the temperature then?
with all the trimmings. We even had pumpkin pie. And not knowing it, that would be the last meal that a lot of our troops would ever have.
One of the major battles in the confrontation was the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, where American Marines were hopelessly outnumbered and surrounded by the Chinese military.
A lot of people would look at the Chosin Reservoir as a blunder in military history, but it was not. If you stop and think, we didn't have cell phones, walkie-talkies, if you've had any experience with them in large mountains, cold temperature, didn't work well. We had very little communications. In fact, a lot of our communications was spread by mouth. Like one of your general orders in the Marine Corps and the Army is to pass on all calls more distance from the guardhouse than your own. So you just pass it down the line. And if you've seen some of the old movies, you'd see some of that passed down. Part of the 5th Marines would be stay at Tongkon Pass, T-O-K-O-G, I think, Tongkon Pass. And that was a small area in the pass that was, and remember there's only one road in and out of the Chosin Reservoir. So that was to keep open so that we'd have our supply lines and things open. Fox Company kept that open. And the rest of the 5th Marines moved on up to Udamne, which is a sort of flat-like area up in the basin around the Chosin Reservoir. And the Marines had taken the high hills on each side. The one farther north was the 7th Marines, 7th Regiment, and the 5th Regiment, and we were all pretty close together there. On the early morning of the 27th of November, we had a rude awakening, probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, some say 2. But the Chinese basically attacked us. And what had happened is they had encircled us all around the Chosin Reservoir. And they basically overrun their positions. But there's been estimates that they had as much as 200,000 people. There was two regiments of soldiers, and I think we had the 2 regiments of Marines. So we were outnumbered, say, 15 to 1.
But the leadership of ordinary Marines who performed extraordinary acts of heroism led to one of the most improbable victories of the Korean War at the Battle of Chosin Reservoir. In November of 1950, Communist Chinese forces started to invade South Korea and push the United States Marine Corps back. the 1st Marine Division was pushed back to Chosin Reservoir. The Chinese general sent all his troops to Chosin so they could demolish U.S. troops. The numerous Chinese surrounded the Marines, and the American forces began retreating to the coast.
Evening of the 29th of November and the 30th of November, the first group started moving out of the Chosin Reservoir. But when the word was passed down, the Marines were almost chilled to the bone that we were going to retreat. And that was a nasty word for any military organization, that you're going to retreat. And then that's when Oliver P. Smith, the commanding general of the 1st Marine Division, said, "Retreat hell, we're just attacking in a different direction." Chesty Puller was quoted a few days later as saying, "We got them right where they want us. They're all around us and they can't get away from us."
The Battle of Chosin Reservoir took place at Chosin Reservoir in the South Korean mountains during winter. The battle lasted from November 26 to December 11th. It was extremely cold and the conditions were severe. Sometimes the temperature would drop to -40 or 30 below zero.
So there was probably maybe 30 of us or less. And we ran out of ammunition. And so basically what we did was what you might call hand-to-hand combat. And there was we would actually just claw at their eyes anyway, because at that point you knew that victory was the only alternative to death. And it may sound scary now, but you were just doing a job then and were busy. Well, instead of ammunition, the Air Force, and you may think the Air Force never makes a mistake, but they do. They drop Tootsie Rolls instead of ammunition. Now, Marines are known for their calmness and never get excited and never use any bad language. And I lie too. But they were using language that probably you never heard of before, and maybe it would bust the Chinese eardrums. In other words, they were angry that they had Tootsie Rolls instead of ammunition, because your ammunition is your lifeline. Well, we found out that the Tootsie Rolls, if you held them next to your body or just put them in your pocket, they would stay thawed out enough that you could eat them. And that's about all we had to eat. It was probably around midnight. It was dark, cold. And you remember that the average temperature in the Chosin Reservoir was between 30 degrees below zero to 60 degrees below zero. And it was out in the open, and even sea rations would freeze up. So everything froze up. And your weapons got so cold you learned not to touch them with your bare hands, because you would lose some skin if you did. Anyway, when we come into the perimeter at Hagruri, and that was a pretty good defensive place there, the Marines fell into parade ground form. And instead of coming in as stragglers, they marched in, singing the Marine Corps hymn and another song you may have heard, Amazing Grace. And you can understand both those songs. Colonel Murray, who was the regimental commander of the 5th Marines, and General Smith came out in their sock feet and started clapping that his Marines had made it.
U.S. Marines fought the Communist Chinese soldiers from below and defended their positions. The U.S. Marines were outnumbered 29-1, yet they defeated their enemy. Marines were constantly fighting or attending to their wounded. Throughout the battle, the Marines were trying to reconstruct the road from Coterie to Hagruri. After 14 days of constant battle in severe conditions, the Marines assembled a bridge where they were picked up by aircraft and taken to refuge.
They had one more objective to do, and that was to take care of their wounded and their dead. And the only way that you could tell the difference between the dead and the wounded was to lightly tap their jaws. If their eyes moved, they were alive. If not, they were dead. And we were lining the dead up, or the Marine, and the Navy corpsman was helping us. And finally he said, this is just like a bunch of Marines. They line everything up in a military manner.
The Battle of the Chosin Reservoir is one of the most important battles in United States Marine Corps history. 15,000 U.S. Marines, who were surrounded, defeated a communist force of 120,000 by escaping capture and rescuing from certain death over 100,000 Korean civilians who would have otherwise fallen into the hands of the Chinese or North Korean military.
But if you want to know why we must fight, that is a good reason to save the children, the schools, and the ladies, and the people that are not able to fight for themselves.
These great heroes in this division, many of whom showed great leadership and exhibited personal sacrifice that inspired their comrades to keep fighting, are called the Chosen Few or Frozen Chosen.
Now, there's an organization called the Chosin Few. It is all those people that was in the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. And they have adopted the coterie star as their emblem for that. Anybody that's in that battle, you're missing the coterie star, and they know that. It was shiny, and if you looked at it, it was kind of like egg shaped, and it was it wasn't real. It was like something you saw in a movie. And believe it or not, did you see the movie Ten Commandments? Mm-hmm. You remember the wall of water when they parted the sea? That reminded me of the coterie star, because it was just sheets of snow on each side. And you felt like you was almost in a tunnel. And it stayed there, and instead of really shining, it just lit up the area.
After the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, General MacArthur was relieved of his command of U.S. forces in Korea by President Harry Truman. The conflict between General MacArthur and President Truman had been brewing since the beginning of the war. MacArthur believed that the possibility of Chinese interference and intervention was small, and he took no action. However, in November and December of 1950, U.S. Marines were surrounded and pushed back into the Chosin Reservoir. Amazingly, the Marines were able to defeat the numerous Chinese. In a presidential address, Truman relieved General MacArthur and explained his reasons in doing so. The president explained, "It is right for us to be in Korea. Communists in the Kremlin, who are engaged in a monstrous conspiracy to stamp out freedom all over the world. I believe that we must try to limit the war to Korea for these vital reasons. To make sure that the precious lives of our fighting men are not wasted. To see that the security of our country and the free world is not needlessly jeopardized. And to prevent a third world war."
MacArthur did make this statement, that the Marine Corps had taught him an important lesson, that you cannot win a war with gentlemen soldiers. There is absolutely no nice way to fight a war, and nothing nice about it. Now,
The Chosin Reservoir proved that America had the resilience and commitment to halt communism anywhere in the world, even against overwhelming odds, and secured the United States Marines a special place in Korean history.
Fight we must when our nation or our liberty is in danger, or our people are endangered by another country. And we should always remember that even with this, our religious freedom is the very foundation and cornerstone of all American liberties and freedom.